US President Donald Trump, well, he's expressing frustration over a lack of support for his plan to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, when Iran has effectively blocked the key passage since the war started.
We have 45,000 troops in Japan. We have 45,000 troops in South Korea. We have 45,000, 50,000 troops in Germany. We defend all these countries. And then, do you have any minesweepers? And they say, well, would it be possible for us not to get involved? We spend trillions and trillions of dollars on NATO to defend other countries. And I always said, but if it ever comes time to defend us, they're not going to be there.
Well, joining us here in the studio in Doha is Mohamad Elmasry, professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies, and Al Jazeera's Resul Serdar, who's reported extensively from Iran. Good to have you with us. So what kind of message, Mohamad, does it send when we see Donald Trump there complaining that his allies don't want to help him on this point of the war, compared to the statements of how great American power is that we were hearing on the first days of the war?
Yeah, I think someone's going to write a really interesting book about the Donald Trump war discourse. It's been a series of contradictions. I mean, just yesterday, he made multiple statements that contradicted themselves. At one point, he also said that maybe we shouldn't even be there, which is a remark that has gotten a lot of negative reaction, particularly online, on social media sites, even people sympathetic to the U.S. service people who died, who were killed, 13 of them. They're saying, well, if we didn't need to be there, then why are our people dead? What is the purpose of this war? And this comes in the context, Sammy, of 2 weeks now of contradictions. And really a kind of a series of, you could say, miscommunication on the part of not just Donald Trump, but also Pete Hegseth and other officials. So it's really becoming a crisis now for the Trump administration.
A messaging crisis. On the other hand, Resul, the messaging coming from the Iranian side is looking more confident, would you say? They're even mocking Donald Trump's statements and calls for help.
Look, for Iranians, so now they believe that the time is on their side, and they believe that when the war is over, Iran is not going to be taken out of the regional security order, but rather it's going to be a dominant factor in the regional security order when it comes to the Gulf, when it comes to Strait of Hormuz. But even they are now talking about beyond that. So Iran's proxies or allies are also going to be at the table, and Americans and Israelis are going to come to the Iranian terms and accept not only to attack Iran again, but also to make sure that Iran's allies are also not being attacked, particularly Hezbollah, in the future. So the level of the confidence is that, but they're extremely cautious as well. A couple of reasons. First, they know that their military capacity have been significantly degraded, and also the internal strife is still possible. Just yesterday, Sami, in Sistan Balochistan area, there has been a group attacking a police center and killing several police officers. And then in Khuzestan, in the Arab region, they have been a group of people arrested, being accused of preparing for armed attacks. And then days and nights, we know that IRGC is conducting the military operation in Western Iran, where the where Kurds mostly live. So Iran is having its own vulnerabilities, issues, and definitely the internal fragility here.
One interesting point was, Professor Elmasry, when Donald Trump was talking about the response from allies, he said some are on the way, they're on the way. Do we know who he's talking about? And on the way to do what?
Yeah, I mean, overwhelmingly, there's been rejection from the international community, and there isn't clear information to your question, or to answer your question. There isn't clear evidence that anyone is on the way. There are some reports that there are perhaps a handful of countries that may be willing to assist kind of indirectly by providing drones or
he mentioned
weapons.
minesweepers. Do we know if there's been widespread Iranian mining of the Strait of Hormuz? Because we've heard about Spanish and Chinese ships coming and going, right?
Yeah, I mean, the experts that I've been following are saying that it's unlikely that Iran has mined the strait. But I think the takeaway here is that Donald Trump did not calculate this endeavor very carefully. He expected one set of outcomes, and a different set of outcomes has actually greeted him. Yeah, and so now he's having to deal with the fallout of all of that. And I don't think he's going to get a bunch of countries to come in with a coalition to defend the Strait of Hormuz. The attitude of the international community is very much, you got yourself into this war. We didn't ask for it. We were warning against it. Why should we then come and help you?
You break it, you own it. Resul, Serdar, you mentioned the degradation that's going on, but at the same time, we're seeing a continued steady pace of rocket fire from Iran, right? So what is the military relevance of that degradation if they can still fire back?
So for Iranians, what we are hearing from the American officials is that 90% of Iran's stockpiles, including the drone production facilities, that have been destroyed. So this is the official narrative. And perhaps it is true, but this is what is available to the knowledge of the intelligence services. So, and then we can question that knowledge, whether that is accurate or not. So you might think that, for example, Iran has X amounts of drones and the capacity is to a certain level. But as far as I understand Iranian system, they are a multi-layered system, not only politically and military in terms of the military ranks, but also when it comes to the production as well. So in that sense, it's not quite clear how much of the stockpile still Iran is possessing. And another thing here is that, Sami, so Iranians have quickly realized that when it comes to the conventional war, its army is no match of the Americans, but it has the capability for the asymmetric warfare. And they have been preparing for that for decades. And just while we're talking about Hormuz, they do not need to send thousands of the floating mines over there. One speedboat and one floating mine could practically bring the whole Strait of Hormuz and the movements across the Gulf to a halt.
There's a question, though, of whether the Iranians want to cut completely all shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, or is it more in their interest to have a more selective approach using drones or more selective weaponry? Is that how you read where the conflict is going? So they can pick and choose who's allowed in and out?
Well, that's what they've been saying. They're officially saying that the strait is open, that it's not closed, that it's only closed to Zionists, the U.S. and Israel and their close allies. That's going to be logistically more difficult to manage. But to your point, yeah, they could use...
What is the next step up for the U.S. then on the escalation ladder?
Well, there are reports suggesting that Donald Trump wants to send in ground troops, possibly to Kharg Island. That would be a major escalation if the U.S. is seen as having taken Kharg Island. I think then you could expect an even more significant retaliation from the Iranians. Let's not forget that both the Americans and the Iranians have been warning for 2 weeks now that they have many cards to play, that they have sort of tricks up their sleeve. And so I do think while we have already climbed the escalation ladder, unfortunately, I think there's still a lot more potential climbing. This could escalate a lot further.
All right, thanks so much, Professor Mohamad Elmasry from the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies and our senior correspondent, Resul Serdar. Thanks for coming in.